SQology Podcast, interview with Mike Mineo. I'm Ben Zimmerman, and on the phone with me today is Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad.
That's good.
Preface here, I don't really know you. I've never met you, and I don't know a whole lot about you, other than I see your name pop up on the internet all the time, especially in the past, year or so. And it seems that you have a lot of activity, and a lot of people know of you and know about you. And first of all, let's get into some of your background and history. Maybe tell us about how you got into the hobby and maybe what you've done professionally in the competition lanes and what you're doing today.
Well, originally, I did my own cars, and that was when I was younger. But I was a musician, and then I got into studio stuff. But when I started doing cars, they really fascinated me, and it was like a real challenge to try to simulate that sound. So then I fell in love with it. And from 25 on, that's all I ever did. As far as my background, music, I've dabbled with electronics, I dabble with acoustics, I dabble with anything that helps me get to that point where I can create the original source music, that I love so much.
So you've built cars for your own pleasure, and then professionally, did you work in the industry? Do you work in the industry? How did you get involved with, taking it beyond a personal enjoyment thing into what it is today?
When I started building cars for myself, people started liking it, so I had a lot of clientele, so I opened a business. I did that for 30 years.
I see.
As far as competition, I competed. I've won a few, I won events, and a few events I lost, and I learned a lot losing, so I always found it something I liked, and I still like it to today.
Right.
I just don't get involved anymore because I'm trying to figure it out.
Right. I think we're all constantly trying to figure it out.
Right.
That's part of the thing with these podcasts. We get to a point where we think we're doing really good, and you talk to some other people and you get some other ideas, and I think we're all there.
Right. But I have no delusion about what it is. I know what sound quality is. I've done it. I played it. I listened to it, and stereo separation and all that stuff is really what I look for.
Right.
I believe that when a recording is created, which I know is to be factual, the energy that's created in that recording by the musicians is in the music. And if coloring isn't added into the music, you can feel it deep in the mix. So that's my interpretation of sound quality, and that's the interpretation of the explanation in any dictionary or anybody who reads about what sound quality means. So I'm trying to establish that. I feel it's important that we know what that is, instead of saying this is sound quality because someone says it. I believe it's something that should be more scientific, more a standard, so the people that do want it know what to call it.
Right. So what is kind of the difference between a standard system that somebody builds and doesn't really know what a sound quality system is, and then what differentiates that between what you consider a sound quality system?
Well, let's do OEM, because everybody knows that.
Sure.
Everybody buys cars and listens to the system. How do you get stereo with 21 speakers? It's a small little cavity. It's smaller than your closet. And you got 21 speakers all over the place. How are you ever going to get stereo? So those stereos do sound good. I mean, they're not bad sounding. They have good tonality, but they don't give you the presence of the music.
So it's the imaging, the staging and the imaging. I guess that's different in a 2-channel, very minimal speaker system versus speakers everywhere and sound everywhere.
Right. And for a long time, people would come to me and say, I want sound surround. And I'm like, why would you want that? They go, well, because I want the music everywhere. Why would you want that? Music is directional. It's not something that comes from everywhere. Our ears are good at picking out direction. We all have different ears in the way we listen. Some people like more bass. Some people like more highs. Some people like it flat. Some people like the happy curve. That's a matter of, taste. But,
sure.
But the presence of music, of the musicians in the music, is really what I look for, because it's an experience. It's just like watching a live band with no visual aspect of it, and it's just something that I like, and I love doing, it takes me out of my day, and puts me in a place that I'm really comfortable in, And I think that's why a lot of people do this, and want to achieve that. There's a lot of different camps that have a lot of different opinions, but at the end of the day, facts are fact. Science is science, physics is physics, and engineering's engineering, and an audio engineer's job is to convey that band's ideas in the music. And I feel that that's my job to do that when I build a system. Not everybody wants that. Some people just want loud music, and they measure it with numbers. And real loud music, let's say like a jet plane, if we recorded that and put it in a vehicle that can reproduce that, you're not going to walk out with the same hearing.
This is true.
Right. And how loud is that?
What, like 160 decibel or so?
It's actually like 130.
130?
Yeah, 136, because it's...
I guess that depends on how close you are to it, but yeah.
No. Well, they've done measurements,
right.
And like a jackhammer in the street, they'll use that as a reference, and that's like 125. When you stand next to the jackhammer, that thing like pounds my head, So if you recorded that and put it into the vehicle, it should reproduce that.
Yeah.
And I've done these tests, like... by train stations, and recorded the train going by. The real trick is, where do you put the microphones? Because the distances between the microphones create the combs. So you have to try to simulate the original combs to get that real illusion, So I like doing that. That's who I am. I like testing. I like finding out how to do it and create it. And I love it. And I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah.
I think that's why others do. I can't speak for them. But when I make somebody hear what I'm talking about, they turn pale white because they never heard it.
Right. I remember that experience of the first time I heard a true stereo sound system in a vehicle that was good. And it's mind-boggling if you have never experienced it before. For your first time, for sure.
Right.
Yep.
I totally agree. Yeah. And I'm an advocate for it, and advocate for it. And I want people to hear it. I think it's great. I dedicated my life to it.
Right.
I don't really care about, degrees and awards and all that. To me, the taste is in the pudding. It's the work that matters. And that's where we should gauge the person's abilities. Not everybody with degrees is going to have a solution, but it's nice to have. It's nice to understand the basics, and that's why I went to school, because there was a lot of stuff going on that I wanted to be able to solve. And I took electronics. And the reason I chose electronics was because I wanted to be able to create the devices or modify them to do what I need. And I needed to understand the basic fundamentals of how it worked.
From a circuitry standpoint.
Yes.
Right.
And there was always two ways of tackling it, even back in the 90s when I was competing. There was an acoustic way and there was electronic way. So back in the 90s, a lot of guys were doing waveguides, and those were real stereo. They were doing stereo. But the group delays were wrong, and they created issues with other speakers, because they were in different phases.
Okay.
But they did sound good. So I didn't want to go that route. So I decided to go DSP, and I would do the same thing they were doing, but I was doing it in electronics. So I would get the same result.
Right.
So I would make my far fields louder than my near fields to try to create that access to get the balance in between the car.
Attenuation, sure.
Well, attenuation is not related to phase, but people assume it is because it gets louder when you're in phase. But sometimes you're not supposed to be in phase. Directly, remember, there's 180 degrees. And then it goes to the other side of it. So where in that position in the music you are is important, because the distance between the guy and the speakers when he created the recording is going to be creating that phase. Of the phase line as the reference is what I'm speaking about. It gets technical about it, and I don't want to bore people about it. But
I'm trying to wrap my head around it, to be honest with you.
At the end of the day, what's important is that you sit in a vehicle and a car to me is more like a studio than a home stereo or a club or an outside venue. And the speakers are ear level, just like the way the recording engineer did it. So there is a lot of advantages in a car that other environments don't have. One disadvantage that people seem to bring up is reflections. Yes, but reflections are where the harmonics lie. So if you try to simulate what originally happened by angling the speakers correctly, and I use time alignment and for latency. Latency is left and right is never the same because components are not the same. So they create certain delays, and to try to get it back into balance, that's what I do. But in today's
from an electronic signal standpoint,
right?
Okay.
Today, and what's very, very important is the input, because the input is what creates everything. So if you start off with a really poor input, no matter what equipment you put to it, it's never going to be what it was.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of focus lately, especially on getting the most out of the original recording, be it high resolution or a direct USB input to a DAC that keeps everything as digital as possible until the output stages or what have you. But yeah, I think a lot of people have really come to realize that the original source material is one of the biggest pieces in getting everything right.
That's why in the beginning I focused on my head unit, and my head unit does stuff that most people don't do. It's 48 volts and 24 volts, and it switches in between A and AB. So at loud volumes, it doesn't matter, because I believe after 136, everything's coloring anyway, because everything's rattling. No matter how much you dampen that car, there's going to be stuff happening. The grills, the environment of it, Right. And even microphones, the higher you go in pressure, the smaller the bandwidth. So you have to look at it that way. That's the way I looked at it, is how much can a microphone handle? Anything above that isn't sound quality.
Yeah, I mean, there's different microphones for different applications.
Just like speakers.
Sure.
Right. So I have certain speakers I use, and I'm not talking about brands, I'm talking about sizes, to create the effect that I need in that vehicle.
So the size
matters.
Right,
yes.
Sure.
It's like drums. Every drum has a different size and they play different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff that I've noticed that most love but have a difficult time getting is mid bass. Now, the reason that is because mid bass is middle C. Now, everything in every instrument follows that. It is the fundamental. If you don't got middle C, how do you play?
So can maybe you define middle C quickly for those who don't know what middle C is, and then maybe talk about what frequency?
That's the middle of a piano. Okay. It's the middle of a guitar.
So frequency range, what?
About 256.
About 256.
Yeah,
so,
if I remember correctly. Now, that's where mid-range lies. Now, mid-bass. We have to realize in any other venue, people don't separate their mid-bass from their bass. Only in car audio we do that.
So you're talking about PA speakers where you've got a big, 12 or 15-inch driver that's pumping out everything and then mates up to a horn tweeter typically.
Right.
Okay.
And then on top of it, we have the placement of speakers in different places. So some people may put their subs in the front. Some people put them in the back. They're never the same as where your mid bass is. That's why most of the cars that do like Fenders that use a wide range are going to have good mid bass address. So time alignment in my case is to make those two meet, to be one.
To make to make the driver pair.
Right. So my job,
sure.
Right, the way I look at it as my job to be, is to take the four speakers, which is bass, mid-range, and tweeter, to be one. That's my job.
Uh-huh.
What equipment I use to do it is going to vary because every speaker is different. Every car is different. Every customer is different.
Yeah. Those are the challenges everyone faces, and especially modern vehicles.
But I believe on a competition level, there should be a standard. It shouldn't be who's using what. It should be, why is this better?
Sure.
Because this speaker addresses more environments than that other one. And me as an installer, I'm going to like that speaker. And I'm going to mention one. Back in the day, MB Court, the reason I liked it, because it played good in a lot of different cars. So I didn't have to go crazy to try to create that sound, that response that needs to be in that vehicle.
Right.
It just was a wider range. It had its issues too, don't get me wrong. But for the 90s, it was good. Today, there's stuff that makes that stuff look backwards. But that's the way progress went. Materials got better and people understand it better. So they created better stuff. There's a lot of great stuff out there today, and I love it. I mean, I've never been a brand guy, and that's cost me because I'm more of a consumer-based guy.
Right.
I believe in value, and if this customer needs a speaker I never heard of, but it works, I'm using it.
Sure.
Not because I can't use the other speaker. I just don't want to do all that work.
Right.
I did a lot of work in my Camaro to make everything work. I always wanted it to be drop it in, dampen it, because I believe in dampening. Without dampening, you don't got anything. So if your car's not dampened, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find many people that disagree with you on that today.
Yeah, and grills on speakers are very important. So if you buy a speaker that's, and I'm just going to use a number, $1,000, and if that grill rattles, what's the point?
Sure.
So there are great speakers out there, but the grills are not good, or they're great components, but the crossover ain't right,
Yeah,
But
a lot of speakers, especially a lot of the a la carte higher end speakers that people use today in competitions, don't even come with grills. So people are either putting them behind, a larger panel that's covered in grill cloth to hide them, or they're fabricating their own grill, or they're buying some other, generic grill that might happen to fit the size of the speaker and the holes.
I've, my grills are more like a barbecue because they're really thick, titanium, and I didn't want them to rattle. But when I would show my car, I would have the grills on, not my grills I created, but I would have the original grills that came with from the factory. But when I went through sound quality, I would remove them. I do like the way they look. Don't get me wrong.
The factory grills, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that come with the speakers.
Oh, I see.
But they diffuse so much of the sound.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you go, especially putting a restrictive grill over let's say, a wider band mid-range that's playing up higher frequencies, it's definitely going to diffuse that sound differently with or without the grill.
Right, and high frequencies, anything over 8K, your ears don't tell the difference anyway if it's distorted or not. Most of imaging, in my opinion, comes from 800 to 8,000.
I totally agree with that. I did go even lower. I would say, 200, 250 to up to 5 or 6K generally.
And you're right about that, but that depends on the installer and how far he can take it. So I'm going to give it a wide range as far as 800 is down. But the ears are not really good at picking out direction from that. So all the imaging is done there. Staging is done in the harmonics, and that needs to be wide. And the closer your stage is, the more compressed the instruments are on top of each other, so you don't get the right spatial effect. And depth is in stereo. So everything that's the same is mono, because it's left plus right. Everything that's different is left minus right, right minus left. So that's where you stereolize. It's in ambience, So try and think about what a car does best. Create that. It creates ambience because it's reflective surfaces. Sound speeds up on smooth surfaces, slows down on rough. Understanding that, you can create those, partitions to create the FFT you're looking for that you think it should be, which is, the the true harmonics that were created. I tell people like this, and some people disagree with me. I believe that the speaker is the guitar string, and the shape of the guitar is the sound, which is the box. And you can take that all the way up the spectrum.
That's really interesting. I've never heard it described like that before, but I can kind of wrap my head around that, see where you're going.
You're a violinist.
Yeah, it's an acoustic instrument. You need string in the box, and right.
Right, and the bow you use, does it change the tone?
Generally not. The
right.
brand of the strings will, but the bow itself, you have different weighted bows that affect the different playing styles, but it doesn't really affect the sound of the string.
Or the tone of the shape. That's the difference between one violin that cost $1 million and one that cost $100. Is the tone. And you take those same strings and put them on another instrument. Why don't they sound the same? If I'm not making any sense, I mean, so there's got to be something in that. That's the way I feel about it. But
well, in the limited research that I've tried to do, to look up some info on you, I found your YouTube channel, and I happened to stumble across an interview where you were talking about the harmonics being what you focused on in an install. And
yes.
I was trying to wrap my head around, okay, as a violinist, yes, as an musician, I understand what harmonics are, but when it comes to car audio installation, it's not really something that I had ever, considered the harmonics of the actual vehicle itself. I understand how the vehicle affects the frequency response of the speakers, and then generally try to fix that with speaker placement, aiming, and then finally EQ. But so I guess, is that what you're talking about when you speak of harmonics in a vehicle?
Let me use this word for you: overtones.
Yep.
You know what that is, right?
I know what that is.
That's harmonics.
Sure.
Right. So in a musical instrument, we use the word overtones. In a technical sense, it's harmonics. So it's just two different ways of expressing it.
Right.
But in the end of the day, that's what it means. A musician's not going to use the word harmonics because he understands it in overtones. And it's not he understands
right.
what a pure wave is,
Right.
The original creation of that wave. It's all
right.
It's all sound moving in an air.
Yeah.
And I got into a discussion with a few guys that, disagreed with me, but sound takes up space in air. It creates pressure. And if it's aligned correctly, it's going to stay in that one spot. It doesn't matter where your head is. See, I'm not a big believer of path lengths. I believe the path lengths between the speakers, because the information on the right is decoded by the information on the left, and the information on the left is decoded by the information on the right. So if you don't have them pairing off, there's not going to be any information that's being decoded from the recording. That's why you'll see kick panels work well, because kick panels will give you the angle. They'll give you 6 feet behind your head, but you'll notice that they wave off on the ends, because it's actually doing left minus right, right minus left, and putting it in the middle. So you're getting a stereo effect from the middle and the mono effect on the outside. I know that's not, a lot of ways that people look at it, but if you think about it, that's why it tails off on the ends.
Yeah, I'm going to have to rewind that and listen to it a few times, I think, just for it to click.
Because it's all about stereo and mono, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the way it sets up gives you a better advantage the wider the stage is and the further depth it goes. So the further the music is away from your face.
So getting the drivers out as far away from you as possible is what you're getting at here?
Well, yeah, right. You can't
Sure.
You can't go as far as the windshield. So that's why I used windshield.
Uh-huh.
I use reflections as my harmonics, and it's not simple to do. It's not what everybody wants. They just want to put it in a speaker and it works well. That's not going to happen. There's no such thing as that. You're never going to buy the magic bullet. It ain't happening. There's no great speaker. There is speakers that work in great environments. Even as a musician, I have different guitars for different sounds.
Sure.
And I'm sure you understand that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what I do electronically to try to get my Les Paul to sound like my Fender. It is never going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there are musicians that create their own instruments because they're looking for a certain sound.
Right.
Right. And
I understand from a guitarist point of view. That's always everybody's trying to be unique and have that tone that's different than everybody else, or they're trying to mimic someone else's exact same tone. But yeah.
So on that note, does stereo matter? Because if the musician's looking for a certain tone, wouldn't we want to simulate that tone?
Oh yeah, you want to reproduce what they were playing.
Right, he goes to so much trouble to get this special guitar made for him, or he makes it himself. Right. Why would he go through all that trouble? Because it means something.
Yeah.
You know, so I have a different perspective than others because I'm a musician and I did studio work, and I respect that.
Yeah.
You know, I know some don't agree with me, and that's okay. You know.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting to hear your theories on an acoustic setup in a vehicle.
Well, I've spent a lot of time doing the research.
Right.
I don't take what people tell me for face value, you know, because it doesn't quantify anything for me. Just because someone says, try this, it's going to work. Maybe in that situation it might, but what about the next? My job is to make every car sound the same. That's my job. Because if I understand the physics, why would one car sound different than the next?
Because of speaker location, aiming, the inside of the interior. I mean, they're all different challenges. I don't know that I've ever heard a car that sounds exactly the same as another car, to be honest with you.
Why? I'm going to prove that fact because that's why I'm working on my Vet right now. I'm going to make my Vet sound just like my Camaro. Yeah. And then I'm going to push a button and make it something else. But that is what my goal has always been, because my consumers, when they come to me, why is my friend's car sound better than mine? And I spend more money, and it was a different environment, you know?
Well, it's a different environment. It's a different frequency response that they're getting based on either the location and aiming of the drivers, the crossovers invoked, or the EQ applied.
Yeah, I understand all that.
Right.
But
so those are the things that you're trying to equalize. You're trying to get those things to
pan out.
Yeah, right. I get you.
Because my job is to make it right, to make it sound like it was created. So if I'm doing that, why would they sound different? I wasn't.
Yeah.
So that's why I went on that journey, you know.
So you've got a neutral frequency response, or your specific frequency response that you are trying to achieve in every car that you do.
Yes. Well, the original, I do recordings that when I'm playing guitar, I put microphones at certain places, and I use that as my reference because I know what that sounds like.
Right.
So, and if that's not happening, it gives me an idea that I did something wrong.
I got it.
Yeah. And I've gotten, I've used test equipment that I've learned to use, that I've been taught how to use. I went to school to learn. So I have a lot of ammunition to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And once I do, I make it happen. Not every customer is going to want that. They don't want to know the technical stuff. They just want to know it sounds good. But I noticed one thing about me. As I learn more, I can apply that to my lower end systems. A simple solution that gives them a better sound. But on an upper level, let's say like competition, the reference shouldn't be product. It should be what he built, what he's doing, what is his idea, what are we creating here? Give people a reference to what real stereo and imaging and staging is. I've been discussing this with the industry for a long time, that a car that's driver side only could never be stereo. Why? Because you're using, Haas phase to try to create stereo. And just the distances between the ears does not give you a stereo effect, because it's more than that. It's depth, it's height, it's a cylinder of sound, and then you got another instrument, which may be the trumpet player, so he's on a different plane altogether. So it's all different layers that create the sound. But if they're not lined up correctly, you're not going to get the right overtones that the musicians spend a lot of time trying to create. Even a trumpet player, He tries to find the right blowing part, and the sax player the right reed.
Yeah, exactly. So I play sax also, and I know overtones on the sax, and it's right up the alley.
Right. So why is it changing a car?
It shouldn't. I mean, if you're reproducing the source as it was recorded and intended by the artist, then you're either reproducing it that way or you're not.
Right. So DSP to me is that tool.
Yeah.
So equalization is that tool. So I'll use equalization to figure out what's wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm going to get rid of that equalizer.
Really?
Because it's telling me what's wrong with it. It's telling me which frequencies are having a problem. So I'm going to go back in there and try to figure out a different angle or a different way a different reflection.
Okay.
Or maybe the equipment's doing it, the electronics. So then I'll go back in and test it.
So you're using all the measurements and all the processing available to figure out what's wrong with your install, and then you're trying to further optimize the install to get rid of those problems, so you don't have to use the EQ.
Right. Well, think about it. The more components you use, what happens?
Well, the more complicated it gets.
Not even that. How complicated could it be to a guy that's doing it 35 years? Seriously. Guys that have been doing this a long time, it doesn't matter how much different buttons you got to push. As long as you understand what it means, you know how to do it. The real question is the more components you put into the input,
oh, you're talking on the signal side. I thought you were talking about the speaker side.
No, the speaker side is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I was going to say that's where I was going with. The more it gets more complicated, the more you try and add to the speakers.
More failure.
Yeah.
More failure rates.
Right.
To me, a stereo is about turning it on and listening to it. There shouldn't be noises. There shouldn't be clicks or pops. There shouldn't be any of that.
Right.
Especially on a high level system.
Fundamental stuff. Yeah.
Right, and the other thing that I think is important with competition is it should be more consumer based. It should be more realistic for the consumer to want. A lot of guys tell me, well, my car's sound quality. I go, how can it be sound quality? Look how many speakers you got in the door. And then it's like this. It's like having a headphone with a 10-inch woofer, and then the other side's a tweeter. That doesn't make it sound quality.
No, you're right.
There's got to be some kind of rule. It's not that simple. If an audio engineer has to go to all these years of training and learning, there's got to be some training and learning on our end. And it should be acoustics, not product-based, in my opinion. You don't learn anything about product. If there was a magic speaker that I could just put in my car and work great, what do you need me for?
Right.
So why would I want to go that way?
So I know Iasca, at least since I have been competing, has a reference set of headphones that the judges are supposed to listen to and use as a reference for tonality. So the competitors can also pick up those same headphones and train their ear to the tonality that the judges are looking for, and then hopefully be able to tune their system to that same tonality, at least in theory. So
it's interesting.
I think that Iasca is at least going that far to standardize
it's interesting
and educate.
I think that they're doing that because when I was originally trying to figure out how to do it in a car, I used something called COS headphones, and they were electrostatics. And originally, it sounded better in my car. Mm-hmm. And I still use them today to keep me focused. Mm-hmm. In other words, you need a reference.
Everybody has a reference. Yeah, we discussed that in our very first episode. It's all about the reference.
Well, we need to get our ears in the right right mental state, I guess. I don't know what word to use, but we need to get the ears ready. And the way I do that is by putting on these headphones and listening to music that I know really well, and that makes me focus. And I do that on every car. See, I don't just do it once. So, like, if I was a judge, I would have my headset with me, and then when I went into the next car, I'd reset my ears.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Because we're human beings.
Yeah.
And we make mistakes really simply.
You become your reference changes from vehicle to vehicle. If you're a judge, you're walking around, you begin to become accustomed to the vehicle that you're judging at that time. So having a reference that doesn't change is a big benefit there. Yeah,
I'm working with a few of my friends to try to create a machine that will do that. It will tell you amplitude. It'll tell you dynamic range, stereo separation, harmonics. You just put in the information, and I think that will change things. Because now people know what's wrong with their car.
Right.
And I think that's important that you know what's creating your problem, because you got 4 speakers and one can be out of whack and it screws up everything else, and especially if it's in mid-range, and I think it's important that we have test equipment that's proprietary just to car audio.
Yeah.
Home audio gets all the perps, they get all the great stuff, and pro audio, and it always seems like car audio is always left behind, and it's the greatest science in the world, because any guy that does a car can do anything else.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because
and I think we discussed that in another episode also, how it almost seems like the car audio is more advanced when it comes to sound processors and using and tuning systems electronically than home audio, who seem to be more purist in, hey, let's take the signal and get it to the speakers with as few steps and manipulation as possible.
I'll tell you one of the biggest advantages home have over car.
Environment.
Not even environment. Their environment's worse than ours.
Depends.
Depends.
You've got a purpose-built room for your...
If you pay a guy $100,000 to go in there and fix it, right? You give me $100,000 and I'm going to create a walking car, so the car is a lot easier to do it in. Look at amplification. Every amplifier has a preamp. When do you see a home audio have 5 preamps? So if we're going to do multi amplifiers, we have 5 preamps, and then we use a DSP, another preamp, and then we have the radio, another preamp. Why do we need so many preamps?
Well, so I'm going to kind of disagree with you at one point there. I use one preamp out of the deck going to the DSP.
Your amp has a gain stage, right? That's a preamp. It has crossovers.
Okay. So
those are preamps, yes. So I'm talking about output. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not talking about processing preamps, all right? If maybe that's the way you understand it.
Okay.
But if you look at also home amplifiers, the volume control is close to the amp.
Right.
It's not 25 feet away.
This is true. Yes. Yes.
So there's a lot of disadvantages that naturally happens with components. Like, for instance, DSP. If you're changing volume in a DSP, digital does not know the difference between volume. It's on or off. So you create something called low harmonic distortions. So you lose linearity. So at different volumes, your car sounds different. So if music is very transient, is what we like, so at different stages of that volume, it's going to sound different. It's not going to be the same through the whole band at that moment, if you get what I'm saying.
I get you. Yeah.
Right. So if lightning hits, and I use this a lot, and people they crack jokes about it, but it's a great way of explaining it to me anyway, for me to explain it.
Let's hear it.
No, for instance, if it's raining in a song and lightning hits, you should be knocked out of the seat.
You jump out of your seat. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's how scared you should get.
Right.
And that's part of the emotion in music.
Yeah.
So if it's not linear, you're not going to create that, because the range isn't about turning a volume control. It's about amplitude happening naturally.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's an important thing to me, especially a really high-end car. I spend a lot of time on that.
So having enough dynamic headroom on tap, basically, to handle those dynamic peaks.
And that's why I created my car to do 142.
Right.
And I know it's not really what's happening after like 136, but bass, if it's not distorting, won't give its direction. So that's what I focused on.
Right.
That's the best I can do. I mean, if there were guys that can do better than that, great, show me, because I'd love to learn. But it's something that I am proud of. My car changes the way it works as it goes through its volume.
Yeah.
Because some stuff's just non-linear. It changes as it gets different amplitudes, different voltage, So I focus on that. To me, that's the details, that are important in a high-end pro car. My car is my acoustic model. I know it inside out. Anything I change, I learn from. So if I take a component that's new on the market and put it in my car and I listen to it, it'll tell me what's happening. I'll know the changes. By knowing that, you say, well, it's so big deal. By knowing that, I know what environment to put it in. So when I get a car that has that, doesn't have that, I add it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like having a speaker that has a 24, or let's say 12 dB dip at 250 hertz. But if you find a speaker that has a 12 dB peak and you put it in that door, the problem goes away.
So you're trying to solve all of the acoustic problems by picking speakers that have natural peaks in places where you may have dips created by the car, and that's where you're going.
Right. That's what I've always done.
So why? I'm curious with the prevalence of DSP in the market and the availability of super high resolution equalizers. Why it just seems easier to me, I guess, to fix things with DSP when it comes to response in the car than trying to find the perfect driver to fit your install to fix all those problems.
I understand what you're saying, but think about it. Every time you add processing, you're telling the chip to do more work, you're making it distorted, because it overdrives itself. So my DSP does not do anything but time alignment. I disconnected everything else, and my processing increased tenfold. So my crossovers are all, active, but they're analog, and which I believe should be, because there's linearity issues there.
Can you explain that real quick? So your crossovers are analog crossovers, but they're active. So you're like biamping via a passive crossover. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah, and I also use left and right amps, so I'm 100% stereo separation.
Right.
So there's a lot of things. In doing that, you create other issues like ground loops, and you have to get through that. So a high-end car is a lot of work, because every time you solve one problem, you create another one. And being a builder of many, I love that challenge. Yeah. It's what gets me up in the morning, and it's just the way I'm made. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just what I like doing. Right. The style differences are just different. Everybody wants this magic box that we can put in our car and make it sound better. A DSP doesn't do that. There is no solving an acoustical issue with an electronic part. It's acoustic. They're different sciences.
I understand where you're coming from with this. I don't know that I wholeheartedly agree with that, just because it's so commonplace for everybody to.
Well, speak to an acoustic engineer and then an electronic engineer, and get them to work together and watch them, because I've seen. The ideas are so different.
Yeah, and I get it. I can see both sides of this. Where I see where you're coming from, and I understand it.
And the engineer, the electrical engineer, always wins, because the marketing guys don't want to spend a lot of money. They don't want to do R&D and do all this, figure out what's going on here. All right, you got this little fix, put in that resistor. All right, the capacitor works. Right?
Yeah, right. So
it's different when a manufacturer does it, because they need to. They want to try to keep costs down. But when I do it as an installer for my customer, I'm the end user. How do I explain that to a guy who understands what I just said? Because I do have customers that do. Mm-hmm. I deal with people that understand what I understand. Right. They just don't know how to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So do you currently work at a shop? Are you currently, selling? Okay.
I'm at my shop.
All right. So what? Maybe I want to get into another question here. We talked a lot about acoustics and a lot about a system design, and that's great. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about maybe some of the 12-volt trends that you've seen in your time in the industry, and maybe where you see things going. Maybe some of the things where you see problem areas or areas where people can improve, or I don't know. What are you seeing in the industry?
Well, like I grew up as the industry evolved. So in the 80s, the cars weren't that good. So I watched the manufacturers of OEM get better and better. And then they got to a point where they were creating great radio look. So the radio, no matter what you replace that radio with, it would never look as good as the radio that was in there. So they were spending a lot of money in tooling design look, the way it looked in the dash.
Sure. I remember the 80s designs and 90s. And
Right. So I moved that direction while the industry, most of my peers went a different way. I started learning about what they were doing so I could make it better inside, because I believed that the consumer wanted that look.
Sure.
Keep it natural looking, not all these little cubes or fancy lights and the radio comes on and fireworks come out,
Right. Kid stuff.
Yeah, right. To me, it just didn't make sense,
Okay.
Not at that period of my life, So I went that direction, and I still think to this day one of the reasons our industry has some problems is because of head units, source units. I repair a lot of work, and I do a lot of people's cars over.
Uh-huh.
And the biggest problems I always see is the source unit, what they do to it, what they add to it to try to get the signal to be full range again. You can't cross over something and then try to put it back to full range. That's just beyond me. As far as wanting to do that, I would never do that. I want the signal before it's crossed over. I want it before it's synthesized. That's the one I want. I want the one that's coming out of the unit.
Sure.
So that's the way I go. It takes a little work to do that.
And a lot of these modern cars don't have a full range signal that you can tap. I think that's a lot of the integration thing that, companies have had to evolve and come up with ways to some
get around
signal.
It. Right.
Right.
And I understand all that, because you want to try to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a bad thing if you're just doing that on a level where the consumer understands that.
Mm-hmm.
So when my consumer comes to me and he says, I can do it this way, or which is the processing that the industry has today, or I can do it that way. I give them the choice. Of course, the money's going to be 3 or 4 times more, but if this guy's serious, I should offer him the option.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way I feel about it. I'm not saying they're wrong or I'm right. I'm saying my job is to be able to do it. Doesn't mean I have to. So that's my take on that. As far as the way I see the industry going, I believe we should establish sound quality, because we should establish it in the sense where we know what it is, so other people can't use it in vain.
How so?
They can't say their car's sound quality when it ain't, when they got 10 woofers in their door.
Okay.
And I like looking at it,
right,
but let's call it something else.
Yeah.
I think, the bass guys, I think, what they do is really cool to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun, and that the whole way they act, the whole thing, the way certain guys play certain roles and parts, I love it, and even the box on top of their cars to hear the sound,
right.
It's all fun to watch. And then you go to the sound quality guys, and it's like watching paint dry. And then they wonder why nobody likes it.
Hey.
And hold on.
Yeah.
And then the guy goes, wait, let me go further. Then the guy goes, how come it can't go loud? Oh, that's not sound quality. So the cars don't even break 90 dB, some of them. And that's what I've heard in the last 2 years. And that's been like that forever. I don't believe in that. A good car shouldn't just be sound quality. It should be hi-fi. High fidelity is the combination of SPL and sound quality. Dynamic range. And you sit in a car that makes you jump when a guy hits the snare, it's supposed to.
Right.
And when he taps on that cymbal really lightly, it's supposed to sound that way. Mm-hmm. Where it's tap. Mm-hmm. So that's really fun to listen to. So even when I put an SPL guy in my car, he may want it 20 times louder, right? Because he likes the bass.
Right.
But he gets what I'm talking about.
But everything
so,
comes
wow,
along
this
with
is
it.
really cool, you know?
Sure.
And when it plays loud, they feel that pain in their ear. You're not going to sit in my car and act like it don't hurt. Because it's going to hurt you. You know, I don't get that part.
It's the same thing at a live, even like a high school band,
right?
Or you go sit in the front row and you're going to be kind of blown away,
right? You're going to be like, I got to go in the back row. You know, I mean, I don't put myself in front of a speaker that's going to do 130 decibels. You know, natural. You know, I don't want to use the word flat because then everybody gets nuts. But the way it's supposed to be, you know, where more frequencies are present in the tone, in this
throughout the volume range.
Yeah, right. In the bandwidth. Right. But you know, I try to explain this to the SPL guys. If you got 100 guys humming and you got one guy yelling, who's going to be louder?
The 100 guys humming.
Right.
Well, yeah. Gotta think about it, but yeah.
If a guy's screaming and 100 people are humming, you know, it's like clapping. If somebody's just going like this with their hands back and forth, and you got 2,000 people doing that, it almost takes down the arena.
Sure.
You know, if you got one guy clapping really loud, nobody hears him.
Yeah.
So I look at things from real experiences as far as not only as far as music goes in a studio or the way people play or a tone of an instrument. I look at live sound.
Yeah.
Like the way my car sounds or the way people talk, the difference in their voices. You know, unique sounds that most of us may not hear once in a while. And I'll record them and, you know, try to understand what's happening here. How do I create that? Because understanding it and creating it allows me to use that in an environment when I need it. The more information I have about how things work, the easier it is for me to find a solution to the problem. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, my goal is to try to simulate that original sound.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear excuses about why I can't or could or compromises. That's not my way of doing things. I want solutions. Sometimes I do compromise because the customer doesn't want to spend the money, but I want to give them the best value I can for that money.
So having a customer focus in making sure that customer gets what they want.
Right.
All right. So, in your years in the lanes and going to sound quality competitions, surely you've heard some vehicles that have done what you were looking for, you know, after that dynamic range and the realism and, you know, the way that they reproduce the harmonics. Are there some highlight vehicles that were standouts to you from the era?
Back in the 90s, we were all trying to understand it. Remember, it's a lot of information. It took me years to just absorb it.
Sure.
You know, when I built my Camaro, it was like I went back to school again. All the things I learned, some of the stuff I learned in school didn't even apply. Yeah. You know, it was theory and it didn't work.
Right. Yeah.
So getting through all that information was the exciting part.
I see.
You know, listening to all these different cars.
Were there some that even today you remember and being like, wow, this car was really awesome?
Back in the 90s, a lot of cars imaged and staged and had stereo because of waveguides.
Okay.
And the conventional speaker guys were struggling. But they had great tonality. It was our industry's always had everybody having. He has great bass. His mid bass is the best. He has great mid range.
So it's the different aspects. Like they excel at something. I
always wanted to get that all in one basket.
Right. So are there any cars that you remember having it all? Besides yours?
No, I'm still trying to get mine to do it all.
Right.
You know, I just recently worked on it, and I increased the dynamic range, and I also increased the SPL. It was normally doing 138. Now I'm at 140, 42, 43. But I'm still, you know, I don't have a way of testing that. Yeah. I don't compete anymore, you know. So my opinion of it has been tainted because I'm thinking about what I hear. You know, I don't have that. I don't go to competitions. You know, I'm thinking about it. I just have to figure a way where we could all, I guess, be fair about it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think
that's
really
a big thing for all of the competitors today. I mean, everybody wants it to be a fair and unbiased, you know, competition, and everybody's trying to, you know, increase that in some capacity. You know, make it more fair, or I don't know. We're still trying to improve.
Well, the way I see it is that if you can make it fair and you got to get the manufacturers out of it. The manufacturers, see, it's like racing. They pick the best guy and then they advertise on his car, not the other way around. The guys pick the equipment and then they advertise the guy. You know, I mean, in the competition, it should be the installers. How many installers win?
Well, so it.
How many installers win? It's the installers that build these cars.
Right.
So they're the ones that should be up front.
Yeah.
You know, the guys that are
some of these guys are especially in the lower classes, the novice classes, the amateur classes, they're building their own vehicles. So
right.
So,
and that's awesome.
Right.
You know, to me, do what yourself is. They always tell me to do it. You get paid for what you're doing. You're not a do it yourself.
Yeah.
You know, if they look up the word professional, they'll figure that out.
Right.
But,
sure.
You know, there is no do it yourself or installer. You build a car, you're an installer.
Yeah.
You know, at the level that you build it, it's a process.
Right.
And it's a journey. You go through that. And there's got to be some key guys up there that are pushing these guys or setting the bar higher all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make him the bad guy. You know, I mean, just because he wants to be different or he wants to be looking at it from a different perspective than maybe they didn't think about.
Right.
But you got to give him the opportunity to prove it.
Right.
Just don't go in there closed-minded and say, "Oh, that can never sound good because it ain't this."
Yeah.
Because he said, you know.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I always expected better, and I'm hoping it does.
Yeah. Well, it's
really
it's interesting. I think that we try. I know myself. I have been certified to judge. I've judged a couple events, and all of the other judges that I know and have talked to, they do their best to put on their blinders when it comes on to brands. And the competitors are the same way. You've got a handful of competitors that want everybody to know what products they're using, and then you've got a handful of competitors who want to keep everything secret. So there is some of that. Good question. I mean,
why should
bias?
we?
Because we're biased as humans. I mean, we
shouldn't be. And if you're a professional,
yeah,
you don't. There's no such thing as that. I give my customer value.
Yeah.
He's always right.
Mm-hmm.
There is no my opinion.
Right.
You know, and I understand why some may get upset, because if you're supposed to be good at what you do and you lose, then that means that guy's better. Not necessarily. It means you need to try harder.
Yeah.
And that makes you better.
Right.
It improves you.
Oh, yeah.
So the guy beating you just made you a better person.
Yep.
So look at it that way, you know?
Yep.
And it's difficult for some people to look at it that way when they feel like it's not fair.
Yeah.
So we're doing the same thing we're doing for the last 20 years. Nothing has changed. The rules have gotten easier. They've gotten different. They're more, I guess, maybe to draw more people in. But what we should really do is try to focus on getting rid of the bias, create standards. I would like to see you put one of these together with 5 or 6 top guys and let me be in the conversation.
We can do that.
Yeah, and let us all discuss.
Yeah.
Let's discuss the different styles.
Yeah.
And let consumers decide, or the other installers decide which way they want it.
Right.
Let them use their own, because custom is about that. No one guy is going to build something someone else builds.
Yeah.
Music isn't like that. Even a guy that copies someone else's music, he puts his own style to it. Mm-hmm. And that's who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm a musician that is an installer, and I'm going to add my own style. I'm not going to do what other people do. I learn from others by watching their work, and I say, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that, but I want to add this to it. I want to twist it into that, But I get my ideas there.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys know who they are that have given me great ideas. and they didn't even realize they gave them to me because we don't think the same. We're not supposed to.
Yeah.
It's music, and that's what I love about music. It's never the same.
Mm-hmm.
You like a song, how many times would you listen to it before you stop liking it?
A bunch.
Right?
Right?
Yeah, but you're going to put music in between it. You're not going to listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So the variety is what creates the fun.
Yeah.
And if I have a song I like and I listen to it every day for the next week, what do you think's going to happen?
You're going to start to get sick of it.
Right? So
right?
That's why it's important, even in competition and that level, there's always going to be people that are going to be different. We don't need to all be the same.
Yeah.
I understand there are different groups and they have their beliefs that that product's great and that when and this is and that. That's all great and everything, but we're chasing away all the other manufacturers that are not in competition. Why? Because they don't feel they can even make a dent. And I'm telling you this from talking to them.
Expand on that a little bit.
In other words, if you got camps that are controlling a lot of the way things work because they have a big voice in the way it should be done, then the guys that are creating companies that have a new company or have been around a while are not going to get involved in competition because they don't have that kind of clout. And how are they going to earn it? If they can't, if no one heard of their brand and they bring that car to that show, everybody's like, who's this brand, please? Can't sound good. It's not even a brand. Yeah, but say that to all the guys that are big today. Because I remember them when they were small.
Yeah.
And they weren't a brand. Everybody should have the same equal playing. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah. Interesting perspective for sure.
Right. And the guys that are on top should set that example, set that bar.
Yeah.
Because if their products are that good, what are you worried about? You got all these engineers. You got all these great people working for you. Let it be what it is. And if your product fails, what's wrong with that? Make it better.
Right.
And that's what drives our industry to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone says, I'm a world champion, it'll mean something. It'll mean that you really do have talent.
Right.
And people will respect that. I get customers that come to me, well, this guy did my car and he's blah, 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 this. And I'll go look at this car and it's a simple problem. Why couldn't he fix it?
Yeah.
And the guy brought it back 10 times. So I become the bad guy because I fixed the problem and made that guy look foolish.
I can see that.
Why did I get even into that problem?
Right. Right.
It's not like the guy's paying me thousands. He's paying me for my hour work labor.
Yeah.
Which is, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the amount of money he made building that $5,000 system.
All right. Well, you mentioned that you're not competing. You're out of it. You're not doing that anymore. I'm just curious before we part, if we'll see you in the competition lanes again anytime soon.
I would like to come, but it's up to them.
How is that up to them?
I don't know. There's a lot of history between me and some of the guys there, and I was actually speaking to somebody earlier today, and I told them, we should just put all that stuff behind us and move forward.
Yeah.
And I get upset, you get upset, but I'm a passionate guy.
Well, it's competition. I mean,
yeah. That's the point. And everybody's different. And that's what I want to do. I want to create culturally significant.
Yeah.
Where everybody is the same as far as where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the music, and whatever products they use, that's great. And if I like a product, that's my opinion. And why do I like it? Maybe because it costs less money.
Right. Well, I can tell you from being in these competitions myself, there are, guys who aren't the best of friends competing side by side. And, there's that, but I wouldn't put some people's views or I wouldn't let that keep you from bringing a car back into the lanes. Let's put it that way. I would encourage you to get back in there and do,
I would like to, but
show people what it's all about.
That's what I plan on doing, but I didn't think I had to go into the lanes to do that.
Well, but it's a good way to get people to hear your. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it's just a good way for people to experience your vehicle. You talk about, how do we get this across to different people? So if you're at a competition and there are people there who want to hear it, they can have that opportunity.
Yeah, and when I created that car, I created it to express what I felt our industry was. And I spent a lot of time on every aspect of my car to actually make people look at it and go, what just happened? Mm-hmm. Because I want to create interest, and of course the sound was very important to me. But when I first started building that car, I had issues with sound, because I'm designing and working out those problems are a lot more difficult to solve than they are to just design. So I threw out a lot of, work that I did because it wouldn't work acoustically.
Yeah.
And this is the result I got, and I spent a lot of money on my car.
Oh, of course.
No, I remember most of the work in a high-end car is labor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you take all my equipment and add it up, it doesn't add up more than a couple of grand. The work was
the labor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how much would I charge for that is a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I'd have to make a living for a year.
Yeah, right.
But the bickering back and forth about who's better and who's worse. At the end of the day, everybody's going to like things differently, and if some people like that, I'm fine with that. But let's give the competition at least a fair shake and say, let's establish sound quality. Mm-hmm. Let's figure out what that means. So when we're trained, or the judges are trained, they already have an aspect of what it is. Because when I got into the industry and started competing, they had a different viewpoint of what I thought imaging and staging and sound quality was. And me debating it with them changed things, because I would bring them facts from what I learned things from experience, and they would bring their facts to me, and it kind of changed me. It added to me. It made me more aware of things that I wasn't aware of. Because remember, I come from a studio background. Mm-hmm. It's not a car.
Right.
So I learned a lot about that stuff from them.
Yeah.
And that's why I find that competition's important too. The buddy system, people see through that. People are not naive. They just may not say anything. I'm more out there. I say what I feel and what I think. And I like bouncing what I think on other people so I can see their reaction. Maybe I got to recalibrate who I am. To get along, because I'm being a little aggressive about it. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Let me examine what it is and learn from it.
Yeah.
And that's why I put myself out there. Because if I don't say anything, how do I learn? Some people have their viewpoint. Why shouldn't I challenge it?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you challenge it? You should.
Yeah, it's always good to keep an open mind and try to see everyone's point of views. And I try to do that not only in car audio, but every aspect of life. So, yeah, and I agree. People can be pretty closed-minded.
I agree to this interview because you were a musician, because I know how you are.
Yeah.
We have our own way of dealing with things. Sometimes we're out there and we love to be on stage. Yes, I love to perform. Do I love getting attention? Absolutely. But that's who I am.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not going to be shy about it.
Right.
And it doesn't make me an egomaniac. Actually, I fight my ego to learn. Because if I had my ego, right. If I didn't use science to my ego, how could I ever have built that car or the cars I built?
Yeah.
It would always be what I think, not what they think.
Yeah.
And it's not about that with me, because when I sit there and listen to the music, and it puts me in that place, and I know you know what it is. There is nothing like it.
Yeah.
Nothing in the world can touch me.
Yeah.
And that's where I rejuvenate.
Sure.
So that's what that is. And I'm not going to stop doing it. Not ever. And if we could all see that point that I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm. Get to that point where you enjoy the music and then everything else disappears. So
it's learning about people.
Yeah.
Because musicians give their secrets away of their life in the music, their lessons they learned.
Mm-hmm.
There's no price of that. You know, it's wisdom with self. You know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, it's honest. It's real. Somebody may tell you, look, here's some advice. And it probably may not be good advice. And you try it, and it causes you more pain. But in music, it's there already. He tells you what happened.
Right.
So that's why I love listening to music, and it really breathes to me, you know.
Yeah.
And people should experience it. They would be much more happy. You know, you could have the worst day in your life, and I'm telling you, I'll put you in one of these cars, you know, in one of these high-end cars.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't even have to be mine or anybody's, and you will not remember why you were mad.
Right.
I promise you.
Yeah.
So
music can transport you. That's for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
So why shouldn't we do it the best we do it?
Yep. I agree.
Because I believe car rodeo is the best place for music. A lot disagree with me. Give me the opportunity to prove it.
Yeah.
You know, and I've spoken to audio engineers, acoustic engineers, and electronic engineers, and they agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't argue the point because I make a good, valid point. What's closer to a studio than a car? The same thing. They both can be controlled.
Yeah.
To control a room, you're going to need all sorts of stuff. Remember, you could put a car in a room. You can't put the room in a car.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's a different science. Our science is not like this.
Yeah.
And training people on home audio for car, I feel, is a mistake. We should set our own rules.
I agree. It's a completely different thing. Yeah.
Right. We should set our own rules and let them follow us.
Yeah.
Because remember, we can do what they do. They can't do what we do.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to delve into while we've got you? Otherwise,
you asked me about where do I think our industry is going. I think people are going to start, you know, like you got like Amazons and you got eBay and you got retail. To me, is a thing of the past. I think that consumers are aware of that. You know, there's hardly no way you can make money on selling product because they can buy it somewhere else. There are customers that don't care. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is value and building cars better than the OEMs is what we do. We've always done that. That's what sparked our industry. How did our industry start? Was because people figured out how to do it better than them. And that's what we should be doing. There is no other brand, or he's the best. It's us all working together to be the best.
Right.
You know, and if manufacturers learn from our research, great. That's one less thing I got to deal with. You know, modifying. Because that's what we did in the 90s. Everybody would give the manufacturers their opinions. Some didn't want to hear it. Some did. And the ones that did listen, they're still here.
Huh.
You know, the other ones went away.
Right.
Because we're the ones that are with the consumer. We hear his response to what it is. And it's our job to make him happy. Because if he's not happy, he's not going to pay us. You know, so... and competition is just another way to reinforce your consumer base also, because you know you got a title while you won, you must be good at it. No, you know, you got to bring that car out there and let other people hear it.
Right.
But I'll tell you one thing. I put somebody in my Camaro, you're going to buy a system.
Yeah.
Because I created it for that.
Right.
That was the purpose.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and I believe a lot of us should be doing demo cars.
Yeah.
Building them and then explaining to people, this is what sound quality is.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
Yeah.
Will the OEMs catch up to us? I don't know. There's too many rules they got to follow. We do what we want. We're there. We make the decision at the moment we want to put the speaker there.
Mm-hmm.
We decide what should be and what shouldn't be, and every car is different. So custom will always be there. You know, so that's the way I feel about it. No matter how much better the OEMs got, we could always make it better. Because that's what we do.
Right.
We serve the consumer.
Right.
If he's in our shop, it's because he's not happy.
Yeah. Well, the OEMs are interested in providing an optimum stereo experience in a vehicle. They're interested in getting a system in there that's mediocre at best to most people, so it's easily appealing to everyone. So, yeah, the goal just isn't there from the manufacturer level to design, you know, true stereo experiences in vehicles, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few of the OEM guys too, and they have a different approach than what we do.
Right.
And they're under a lot of restrictions also. You know, there's a lot of marketing going on.
Yeah.
Budgets and
yeah.
marketing.
Right. Yeah.
If I had to be involved in all that,
yeah.
It's a battle in itself.
Yeah.
You know, and at the moment that I create a system for a customer, I'm thinking about making him happy. And when he smiles, there's nothing like it for me.
Yeah.
You know, you know, I like getting paid too, because that's how I pay my bills. But what drives me is to make him happy. And every customer can be happy. Yes, there are some more difficult than others, but at the end of the day, if you serve somebody really good food, they don't complain. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Mike. I appreciate you, you know, giving us some of your thoughts. And
it's nice to talk to somebody that loves car audio also, you know. And
well, there are a lot of us out here. So I think a lot of people are going to find a lot of value in what you have to say here. Even if it's not necessarily what they agree with, it's interesting to hear your perspective. So
yeah, and I think it would be fun to get more of those guys together.
Yeah.
Let's all do that, you know, have a discussion about what we feel sound quality is and what direction our industry should go as far as competition and demo cars, or what do we call this that's not, you know, and come up with ways to give people different ideas of what it should be and shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You know, or at least explain what it is. If it's non-stereo, what is it? If it's stereo, what is it? If it's sound quality, what is it? Hi-fi or one-note bass or whatever. There should be an explanation for it. What do you call it if it ain't sound quality?
It's music.
That's my question.
It's music, but not the way it was recorded.
Correct.
Best I can put it to you. So.
Right. So, but that's confusing to the consumer because they don't understand what that is. There should be at least something that distinguishes what some of the guys that love it do versus what guys do just because they're using horsepower.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference. You know, to me there is anyway.
All right.
Oh, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you again, hopefully.
All right. Yeah, I hope so. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good night. Bye-bye.